There are some things you don't forget. The sound of a door closing. The weight of a silence that lasts just a second too long. The exact moment you realize that the people who were supposed to protect you have been slowly, quietly taking from you for years and smiling at you across the dinner table the whole time. I remember the Saturday morning it all started unraveling. I was standing in the kitchen making coffee, still in my socks, half asleep. My mother was at the counter, scrolling through her phone. My father was reading something on his tablet. My brother Jake was still in bed. He was always still in bed on Saturday mornings, even though he was 24 years old and fully capable of setting an alarm. The house smelled like toast and everything seemed completely normal. I poured my coffee, sat down at the table, and asked the question I had asked 100 times before without anything going wrong. Did anyone transfer the car payment from the joint account? It's due Monday, and I moved my contribution in last week. My mother didn't look up from her phone. My father set down his tablet slowly, and then he said, "We use that for Jake's security deposit. His new place needs first and last month, and he was a little short." I set my mug down. I looked at him. I waited for the part where he said he was joking. That part didn't come. "That was $1,100, I said. "My car payment is due Monday." My father nodded like I had just confirmed something mildly inconvenient, like a rain forecast. "You get paid next week, right? You can cover it from your own account this time." Jake really needed this place. The location is perfect for him. My mother finally looked up. She gave me the smile she always gave me when she wanted me to be reasonable. I knew that smile. I had been on the receiving end of it my whole life. I didn't say anything else that morning. I finished my coffee. I went back to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed and I thought about how many times I had accepted that smile and let it be enough. This time, something was different. This time I opened my laptop. I want to explain something about the joint account before I go further, because I know what it sounds like from the outside. It sounds like something I should have seen coming. But when you grow up in a family where trust is the water you swim in, you don't think to question the temperature until you're already freezing. My parents had set up that account when I got my first real job at 22. The idea was practical. I was still living at home. Contributing to household expenses was the right thing to do, and a shared account made transfers simple. I put in $800 a month. It covered utilities, groceries, my portion of the internet and streaming, and a buffer for shared household costs. My parents had access. I had access. Nobody else was supposed to touch it. I had never once looked at the full transaction history. Not because I was careless. I checked the balance regularly. I made sure my contributions were landing, but because I trusted that the money was going where we had agreed it would go. My parents were not bad people, I told myself. My parents were responsible adults. My parents were responsible adults. My parents loved me. I opened the transaction history and I started reading. The coffee went cold. The house got quiet. Jake eventually wandered downstairs and I heard the refrigerator open and close and the television come on in the living room, and I sat in my bedroom reading numbers on a screen with a feeling I can only describe as the floor slowly dropping away beneath me. Over 3 years, money had left that account in amounts that didn't match any household expense I recognized. A transfer of $600 in March 2 years ago, around the time Jake bought his gaming setup. $450 in August the same year, around the time Jake took that trip to Vegas with his friends that my parents told me they had helped him with a little. $200 in November, $320 in February of the following year, $1,000 last spring. I remembered that month because I had put in extra to cover a broken water heater, and my mother had thanked me for being so responsible. I added it up twice because I didn't believe the first number. Over 3 years, roughly $6,000 had been moved out of that account for reasons I had never been told and never agreed to. $6,000 that I had put in. $6,000 that I had earned at a job I drove 40 minutes each way to get to every single morning while my brother slept until noon. I sat with that number for a long time. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment because I think it matters. It wasn't rage, not at first. It was something quieter and much worse. It was the feeling of watching a picture you thought you understood, rearrange itself into something completely different. Every conversation I could remember suddenly had a different shape. Every time my parents had said, "Jake just needs a little help right now." Every time they had said, "You're so independent, we never worry about you." Every time my mother had given me that smile, I'd been proud of being the one they didn't worry about. I had worn it like a badge. I was the responsible one, the steady one, the one who figured things out without making a fuss. I had believed that was just who I was. Sitting there with the transaction history open on my screen, I understood for the first time that it wasn't just who I was. It was what I had been shaped into, because it was convenient. I closed my laptop. I took a shower. I got dressed. I went downstairs and I made myself a second cup of coffee, and I sat at the kitchen table while my father watched football and my brother ate cereal straight from the box and my mother folded laundry in the next room. And I did not say a single word about what I had found, because I needed to think. Here is something I learned about myself that day. I don't react well when I'm ambushed. I've seen enough family arguments end badly because someone said everything they needed to say in the worst possible way, at the worst possible moment. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to understand the full picture before I said anything, so I waited. And I did something I had never done before. I called my aunt. My aunt is my mother's older sister, and she is one of those people who has always existed at a slight remove from the rest of the family, not estranged, but independent enough to have perspective. She had watched me grow up. She had watched Jake grow up. She had never once in my memory pretended that things were equal between us when they weren't. I called her from my car, parked 2 blocks from my house on a Sunday afternoon. I told her what I had found. I read her some of the amounts and the dates. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said something I wasn't expecting. "Sweetheart, this didn't start 3 years ago." She told me that when I was in college, my parents had taken out a small loan against an education savings account they had originally set up for me. They had used it to buy Jake the car he drove through high school. They had told my aunt at the time that I was getting scholarships and wouldn't need the full amount, which was partially true, but they had never told me about the loan. They had never asked. They had looked at what was mine and decided it was available because I was doing fine and Jake needed it. I sat in my parked car for a long time after that call. The street was quiet. Someone was mowing their lawn 2 houses down, and the sound was very ordinary and very far away. I thought about the phrase, "doing fine." I thought about how many decisions have been made about my life, my money, my future, using that phrase as justification. She's doing fine. She doesn't need it. She'll figure it out. She always does. I thought about how I had spent my entire adult life making sure I was doing fine, so that I would never be a burden, so that I would never ask for too much, so that my parents would look at me and feel relieved instead of worried. I had made myself into someone who was easy to take from, and I had called it strength. I drove home. I parked in the driveway. I sat there for a few more minutes. Then I went inside and I asked my parents if we could all sit down together. My father muted the television. My mother came in from the kitchen. Jake stayed upstairs. I had asked that it just be the 3 of us, and to their credit, my parents didn't argue with that. I put my phone on the coffee table with the transaction history pulled up. I had highlighted the transfers I couldn't account for. I set a piece of paper next to it with the total I had calculated and the dates, and a brief note of what I believed each transfer had gone toward. My mother looked at the paper. Then she looked at me. My father looked at the phone screen. Then he looked at my mother. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then my father said, "We were going to pay it back." I remembered the exact quality of the silence that followed that sentence. It wasn't the silence of shock. It was the silence of someone hearing something they already knew was coming and still finding it worse than expected. "When?" I asked. He didn't have an answer to that. He said something about timing, about Jake getting more stable, about how everything had moved faster than they anticipated, and they kept meaning to bring it up, but the moment never seemed right. My mother added that they had always thought of the money as a family resource, that everything in the family flowed back and forth, that they had never intended to be unfair. I asked her if she could show me the times the flow had gone in my direction. She looked at me like I had said something unkind. I want to be fair here because I have tried very hard to understand their side of it. I don't think my parents are cruel people. I don't think they sat down one day and decided to take advantage of me. I think something much more ordinary and much more damaging happened. They looked at two children and decided, maybe without even fully realizing it, that one of them needed more than the other. They looked at Jake and saw someone who struggled, someone who needed guidance, someone who required investment. They looked at me and saw someone capable, someone stable, someone who would land on her feet, and then they acted on that assessment over and over for years without telling me, without asking me, without once considering that their confidence in my resilience might also be a way of not having to worry about me. The hardest part wasn't the money. I want to be clear about that because I think it's important. The hardest part was realizing that the story I had told myself, the one where I was the strong one, the independent one, the one who had figured out how to need very little, that story had been written for me, by people who needed me to stay in it. My father offered to start paying it back in installments. My mother said they could talk to Jake about contributing. I looked at both of them and I understood that this conversation, in this form, was the best I was going to get from them right now. Not because they were heartless, but because they had been operating inside a version of our family for so long that they genuinely could not see it clearly yet. I said that I appreciated the offer. I said I needed a few days to think about what I wanted to do next. I picked up my phone and my piece of paper and I went back upstairs. 3 days later, something happened that I hadn't anticipated. Jake knocked on my bedroom door. He came in and sat down on the floor. He always sat on the floor. He had done it since we were kids. And he was quiet for a second, and then he said, "Mom told me some of what happened. She said you were upset about the account." Some of what happened. I noticed that framing, but I didn't push it. I told him the real number. I told him about the transaction history, the 3 years, the $6,000, the savings account from college. I didn't perform it. I didn't try to make him feel a particular way. I just told him the facts, the same way I had written them down on my piece of paper, because I thought he deserved to know them. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I didn't know it was your money." And I believed him. That was the strange part. I looked at my brother sitting on my floor and I believed that he genuinely hadn't known. Not all of it anyway. He knew our parents helped him. He had always known that. But he had believed, I think, what he was told. That there was a family fund of some kind, a shared resource, a buffer that existed for moments when someone needed it. He had never thought to ask whose money made up that buffer. He looked genuinely sick when I told him about the savings account from college. "I drive that car every day," he said. "I know," I said. We sat in quiet for a while. And then Jake said something that I have thought about many times since. He said, "How did you just keep going? All this time, knowing everything you were carrying, how did you just keep going and not say anything?" I told him the truth. I told him I didn't know I was carrying it. I thought I was just being responsible. I thought that's what being an adult in a family looked like. You contribute, you stay steady, you don't make things harder than they have to be. I thought being the one they didn't worry about was a compliment. Jake looked at me for a second and then he said, quietly, "It wasn't a compliment. It was a convenience." I don't know if my brother fully understood what he had just said. I don't know if he could feel the weight of it the way I did in that moment. But it was the truest thing anyone had said to me in years. The following weekend, I went and looked at apartments. I had been thinking about moving out for a while in the abstract. The way you think about things you want but haven't quite given yourself permission to want. After everything, the abstract became very concrete very quickly. I found a one-bedroom about 20 minutes from work. The rent was reasonable. The floors were hardwood. The kitchen window faced east, and the morning light came in at a good angle. I stood in that empty apartment and I thought about what it would feel like to be inside 4 walls that no one else had any claim to, and I signed a lease 3 days later. I didn't announce it as a dramatic departure. I didn't leave in the middle of the night or fire off a letter detailing every grievance. I told my parents over dinner on a Tuesday the same way I would have told them any other news. I said I had found an apartment and I would be moving out at the end of the month. My mother asked if this was because of the account. I told her honestly that it was and it wasn't. The account was what had made me see clearly, but what I was moving toward had nothing to do with them. It was about me understanding, finally, what it costs to be the person who never needs anything. My father asked if we were okay. I said I thought we could be eventually. I said I wasn't interested in cutting anyone off. I said I needed some space to figure out who I was when I wasn't performing stability for someone else's comfort. My mother started to cry. I didn't harden against it. I also didn't let it change what I was saying. I reached across the table and held her hand for a moment, and then I let it go. Jake helped me move. He showed up with his truck on a Saturday morning and hauled boxes up 2 flights of stairs without being asked twice. And when we were done, he sat on the floor of my new empty living room, because that's where Jake sits, and we ordered pizza and ate it out of the box. And neither of us talked about any of it, and it was the most comfortable I had felt with my family in a very long time. My parents and I are talking. It is careful sometimes. There are moments when I can feel us both navigating around things that haven't been fully resolved. My father has started making transfers into a separate account he set up, paying back what was taken in the installments he mentioned. It will take time. I don't know yet whether the number matters more than what it represents, or whether they can become the same thing. What I know is this. I wake up every morning in an apartment that is mine, and I make coffee in a kitchen where no one will look at my contribution and decide it belongs to someone else. And I go to a job I am good at, and I drive home in a car whose payments I make on time. And I am building something that is entirely shaped around what I actually want, not around what I was told I didn't need. I used to think being low maintenance was a personality trait. I used to think needing very little made me strong. It took a transaction history and a conversation with my brother on a bedroom floor for me to understand the difference between needing very little and having learned to ask for nothing. I needed things. I had always needed things. I had always needed things. I had just been very well trained not to say so. The apartment is quiet in the mornings. The light comes through the kitchen window exactly the way I thought it would. I take my coffee to the window and I stand there for a few minutes before the day starts, just standing in the light, not doing anything useful, not being convenient for anyone. It is the best part of my day. If any of this sounds familiar to you, if you have spent years being the one everyone else leans on without ever asking what you're carrying, I want you to hear this. Being capable does not mean being available. Being strong does not mean being silent. And the people who love you most clearly are not always the ones who need you most visibly. Sometimes the most important thing you will ever do for yourself is simply stop making yourself easy to take from. I learned that too late to save $6,000. I learned it just in time to save everything else.